I call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Welcome to the March 23rd, 2022 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Okay, do you want to start with the land acknowledgement, Sean?
Sure. Here. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Badewadmi, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you, Sean. Let's proceed to the roll call.
Sorry, we just had another panelist come in, so I'll just promote them. All right. All right, Councilmember Ekman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Chairperson Brown.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Callawart.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Curtis.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Dale. All right. Councilmember Dish.
Here, Indiana.
Thank you. Commissioner Gabrandel.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Graham.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Gruber. All right. Commissioner Mirsky.
Here in my home in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Vice Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Commissioner Nedrich.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. And Commissioner Oriole. All right. Commissioner Wahing. All right. And let me count here. That is a quorum.
Great, thank you, Sean. The next item on the agenda is the approval of this agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Approve the agenda as written.
Shannon, any discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing no desire for discussion. All who approve of the agenda as submitted, raise your hands.
Aye.
Any or say aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the agenda as submitted was passed unanimously. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on March 10th. The February meeting was postponed until March 10th. So do I have a motion to review the agenda minutes? Lisa Dish and then John Mirsky seconds. Any discussion or suggested amendments? All right. All who approve the minutes of the March 10th meeting, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, hear and see none. So the minutes are approved unanimously as well. The next item on the agenda is public commentary. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. For this meeting, this information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And be patient. There can be a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. And once again, you may call 877-853-5247 or 312-626-6799 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. Do we have anybody on the line yet?
We do. We have 8 phone call-in listeners and 2 hands raised. So I will go ahead and allow phone number ending in 245 to speak.
Okay.
245, it looks like you are muted. So if you could unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Kathleen Murphy. I live at 315 Linda Vista Street. That's in Ward 5. The gas ban in all new buildings and retrofitted buildings was proposed by the Planning Commission at the end of 2022. It was to have been voted on by the City Council in February or March of 2023, but those meetings keep getting postponed. While I worry that this proposal is being indefinitely postponed, I'd like to speak about the tremendously positive impact this proposal could have. If all new buildings or newly retrofitted buildings are to be retrofitted from the start, they will not have to be transitioned to electric in the future. A2 zeros and the city's goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2030 will never be met if A2 continues being powered by gas. Every new building that starts out being powered by gas will eventually have to be retrofitted for electricity in the future. In the meantime, the city's carbon footprint flourishes as we continue to power buildings with gas. The city has approved 7 all-electric development projects since 2020, demonstrating the feasibility of all-electric new construction. Roughly 50 cities and counties across the country have passed ordinances banning or restricting natural gas in new construction and major renovations. I hope that the Environmental Commission can have a voice in supporting the gas ban. I think I understand that recently the city will postpone the gas ban until it renegotiates a heat franchise due in 2027 when the current franchise with DTE runs out. I think the gas ban can't wait until then, 2027, and should be started immediately. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your input to the commission, Ms. Murphy. Who's next up?
Next, we have caller ending in 345. I'm allowing you to talk now.
Hi, this is Kitty Kahn. I live on Krause Street in the 5th Ward. I'm going to read portions of a statement that Jerry Hancock submitted to a 2021 webinar in answer to questions regarding 415 West Washington and building on a floodplain. Quote, most of the 415 West Washington Street site is in the floodplain of Allen Creek. The floodway portion is being recommended for open space and the future tree line, Allen Creek Urban Trail. That is an ideal use of the floodway in this urban area. The remainder of the site is in the flood fringe portion of the floodplain. Proposing to develop the flood fringe either for public buildings or sale for private development would be counter to the mitigation strategies approved by City Council in our 2017 Ann Arbor Hazard Mitigation Plan. The idea of planning for residential uses is not suitable from a floodplain management standpoint. While codes may allow residential uses in the flood fringe, building elevated residential structures in the flood fringe increases the responsibility and cost of city emergency services in responding to flood events, increases the risk of occupants being injured in a flood, and floodplain construction is more costly. The United States Department of Housing and Urban Development prohibits spending federal money for residential uses in the floodplain for these reasons. The city should also avoid facilitating residential uses in the floodplain. Since the city owns this floodplain property, there is an opportunity to positively exceed the building codes and plan a resilient use that mitigates the previous development impact and considers future flood conditions. The current proposal of a mixed-use building that includes residential and occupies the entire flood fringe is not a desirable outcome for the site. From a floodplain management standpoint, the maximum amount of development on this site should not have a footprint larger than the current buildings, should be elevated as proposed, and should not have any residential use, unquote. Please use whatever influence you have as a commission with City Council to discourage them from approving their plan for this site. The city has been buying floodplain properties to protect them, and it is just senseless to build on floodplain land it already owns. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your input, Ms. Khan. And I should just mention in this context that the Environmental Commission's bylaws prohibit us from remarking on individual developments, but we're certainly interested in the general policies of building in floodplains here in Ann Arbor. Okay. So who's next?
Yes, we have a phone number ending in 411. I'm allowing you to talk now.
And Commissioner Brown, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, Commissioner Brown and Chairman Brown and Vice Chair Mitchell. This is James Damore, and I wanted to touch base with you on a couple things that are before you tonight. First off, regarding the resolution regarding gas-fired issues, I support the resolution that's before you this evening. I really feel we need to move forward on this and to meet A20 goals. I frankly feel, with how the previous caller has said, that we have such a zeal for promoting development issues, and I realize this is not the EC's purview here, but we are pushing and pushing for development, and it seems that all other considerations are secondary, whether it's recommendations for going all electric, or ignoring our natural features, which certainly has happened to the Concord Pine developments, and what I'm seeing in terms of what's going down at 415 West Washington. I really urge the commission to really look strongly at pushing strong natural features ordinances and protections. With regard to building something in the floodplain, we are at 100-year events, 500-year events on a much shorter time frame. And with the climate crisis, we have to be resilient. I think we need to take very seriously the notion of development in the floodplain. just a personal anecdote, and it's certainly not compared to a multi-story building in the floodplain. But we are digging out from a $20,000 bill of flood damage to our home due to the power shortage. Water can make a big difference. Am I living in a home that should have never been built in a high water table area? I'm not sure. The hindsight's 2020 as I live in a 100-year-old home. But all of you, in terms of managing, setting the standards for protecting our natural features and protecting our natural systems, including our waterways, we absolutely need to be firm on listening to the science. And when it comes to development issues, and I say this to Councilmember Dish and Councilmember Ackman, I realize your zeal in moving forward. I realize you have some goals, and we can discuss those goals and whether they're realistic or not. But one thing you just simply cannot ignore: we need to protect our natural features. And I strongly urge this body to put measures and resolutions in place to protect our floodplain and our floodways. And Commissioner Brown, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Demore, for your input to the commission. Anybody else have their hand up, Sean?
Yes, we have a caller, phone number ending in 202. Again, that's 202. Now allowing you to talk.
My name is Rita Locke Caruso. I live at 556 Glendale Circle in Ann Arbor. I am Professor Emerita of Toxicology at the University of Michigan. I was an inaugural member of this Environmental Commission. I served for 14 years, including 3 years as its chair. I want to speak to the first item on your agenda of new business, putting residential structures in the floodplain, especially high-intensity residential structures. It's simply reckless. It's a disregard of science. It's a disregard of public safety. Numerous federal agencies recognize this hazard, and our own city ordinances and city plans recognize this hazard. Long-range forecasts predict increased frequency of severe rain events in our area because of climate change. It's irresponsible to promote new residential development on sites that reside in the floodplain. Flooding poses even greater hazards when a site has significant pollution of soil and groundwater. During flooding, these pollutants will mix with the floodwater. Pollutants mixing with the floodwater can expose citizens as well as public safety officers to hazardous chemicals and can spread the pollutants off-site into nearby homes and structures, as well as contaminate stormwater drains and surface waters. It's recognized by every U.S. federal agency and safety agency, as well as the World Health Organization, that this scenario of hazardous chemical releases into floodwater requires careful analysis and expertise to ensure protection of health and safety. Fortunately, the City of Ann Arbor has a highly credentialed stormwater and floodplain programs coordinator, Jerry Hancock, to protect the city, its residents, and its businesses. The city needs to use his expertise to ensure that the necessary guardrails for health and safety are in place. In summary, the City of Ann Arbor should follow its ordinances and plans and utilize staff expertise to reduce hazards from flooding by careful consideration of all options for better floodplain management. Thank you.
Thanks for your input, Ms. Locke Caruso. Anybody else, Sean?
Yes, we have a caller, phone number ending in 534. Again, that is 534.
Hello, this is Tom Stolberg. I'm calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor, and I'm calling in as a former subdivision developer, a current real estate professional who's done a lot of renovation of duplexes, and a future developer because I'm eyeing a site for a small multifamily development. In terms of your second resolution about natural gas, I fully support doing whatever we can there, and I know there's some hurdles there, so I support interim measures in terms of that. I also suggest, and have spoken with other bodies about this, that we have a measurement on every application that comes in, essentially what we used to call, say, an environmental impact statement, a carbon impact statement. when we're weighing our decisions, whether we say yes or no to a project or however we want to influence that project, we should have a number on that so that we know if we approve that project as is, what we have to do, the rest of us, to make up for the deficit that we're creating. If A20 really means 0 by 2030, every time you put something in one column, you're going to have to balance it out somewhere else. So I encourage every commission, Planning Commission, Environmental Commission, Energy Commission, every commission and council to work towards getting a number on every single project. I don't know what it takes to acquire that, where a resolution would start, but I'm encouraging that. Also, in terms of stormwater, just from my experience developing subdivisions, it's getting worse. And I've seen the impact of what just a little bit of extra water can do, say in a suburban subdivision with a wooded wetland. It doesn't take much to push that over the edge to be a dying swamp. Stormwater is part of our climate crisis. It is what we see in Michigan as the impact of a global climate situation. The development that I'm looking at doing, I took a civil engineer out there to evaluate it. And I said, help me design this so that I can exceed stormwater measures. Because in my lifetime, it's going to be a lot worse. And Washtenaw County and the city of Ann Arbor have very good standards right now. But we need to even have better because of what's coming, in my opinion. So we're great, but let's get even better in terms of managing our stormwater. Every project that we put in right now is actually an opportunity to exceed the legal limits of our standards. If we can somehow incentivize developers to do that, because our existing infrastructure is inadequate, and we know that our built environment is inadequate. It's great that we have great standards. How can we do even more to help make up for what we're lacking? Because we know this problem is only going to get worse in terms of the severity, intensity, and frequency of intense storm events. One small point on 415 West Washington. I spoke at council the other day. This application does not meet the intent of our ordinances. It does not meet the intent of our city policies in multiple ways. One of them has to do with the floodplain. Another has to do with its approach to the historic district. So I think it's a problematic application to start with. And I know you're not going to comment on that individual project, but I do want you to take a serious look at it. And I'm hoping other bodies also take a serious look at that project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your input, Mr. Stolberg. Sean, anybody else?
Yes, we have a number ending in 012. Again, that is 012.
Hello. Hi. My name is Muffy McKenzie. I live at 217 3rd Street, and I realize that you are not looking at specific parcels in the city of Ann Arbor, but I would like to discuss the 415 West Washington. And I wanted to say that my property abuts the property of 415 West Washington.
Yes, we can't hear you.
We appear to have lost them. They are no longer on the line.
Okay, maybe they'll cycle back on.
Yeah, they may come back. In the meantime, we do have another caller. We have a number ending in 879. Again, that number ends in 879. You should now be able to speak.
Hi, this is Vince Caruso from 556 Glendale Circle. Coordinate. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can, yes.
I'm sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I'm Vince Caruso, 556 Glendale Circle, coordinating member and founding member of the Allen's Creek Watershed Group, acwg.org. board and founding member of the CARD Group, Coalition for Action on Remediation of Dioxin, and a former executive committee member of the Sierra Club Huron Valley Group. Putting residential housing at 415 Washington would be a major mistake and dangerous in this poorly understood floodplain. New discussions at City Hall regarding developing 415 is ill-advised and dangerous. The Alums Creek Watershed Group does not support this proposal. We communicated this to City Council and Planning Commission. Our watershed management plan adopted by the DEQ, Washtenaw County, and City of Ann Arbor agrees with Jerry Hancock's comments on floodplain management. The First Street Foundation, an open source flood modeling entity, has been working closely with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, in recent years to update the greatly low-ball floodplain maps by up to 33%, and FEMA agrees they need to be updated. FEMA is now working on FEMA 2.0 to update these maps that they say are inaccurate. Our current city leaders pretend to plan for global warming, but propose building and residential, no less, in a dangerous floodplain location. For some reason, the city officials failed to involve Jerry Hancock on the evaluation of the 415 plan. Planning officials stated it was our bad. Jerry made comment anyway. Previous caller quoted him. As Rita, my wife, has said, chemicals on the site are said to be treated, but they float in flood water. In addition to chemicals from flooded cars, could be very dangerous. These chemicals will migrate into the neighborhoods and potentially contaminate homes in the Old West Side. This site at 415 West Washington was completely flooded in 1968 in the 100-year rain. Some would say it was really a 50-year rain. We had city officials, Watershed Council members, and city and other county officials in that building when it flooded, and they could not leave the building. The soon-to-be drain commissioner who was at that meeting, his car was totaled with the flood water. They had no idea how dangerous the flood was going to be, which tells you something, that the flood experts were trapped in a building in this site. The 68 flood waters were very close to the train trestle tracks at 415 at 10 feet 6 inches high above the roadway. This site is in all likelihood has much more floodway due to climate change, and FEMA lowballing the floodplain maps will be much more dangerous than the map suggests. We really need to pay attention to flood hazard. We've had 1,000-year rains in Michigan. UP towns were destroyed. 13 bridges were destroyed near Holland, Michigan on a 500-year rain. They're happening more often and are much more dangerous than people understand. Voters passed in Ann Arbor affordable housing tax proposal with a ban on funds being used in floodplains for a reason. Alums Creek Watershed Group championed the resolution with our council member at the time. Floodplain and floodway delineations in this site are arguably outdated, inaccurate, unsafe for suspecting individuals. Dr. Missy Stoltz, the city sustainability and innovations manager, states at the A2 kickoff that she did not support building in the floodplain, period. No discussion, no question, just no. City has made major mistakes in this area in the floodplain. The homeless shelter had to be stopped construction, had to have a stop work order because local residents, including the Alums Creek Group, showed that the DEQ that the building would have been in the floodway, which was illegal. That $1 million plan was scrapped, and they redid the building and built right up to the line that the DEQ drew with a pencil. Probably now the building is probably in the floodway as it moved up the hill. Hawaii on West Washington lost the required FEMA freeboard open 1-foot floodplain safety zone in just 1.5 years after it was built. Very dangerous situation. We need to make sure that we don't put our residents in harm's way, and floodplains need to be respected. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Caruso, you've run out of time. Do you want to wrap up quickly? Hello?
I'm fine. That's okay. Thanks. Sorry I ran over. Thank you.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you for your input. Anybody else online, Sean?
Yes, we have a caller, phone number ending in 012. Again, that's 012. You should now be able to speak.
Oh, yeah, that's Miss McKenzie. Hello, Miss McKenzie.
I'm so sorry. My apologies. I don't know what happened there.
That's okay. We can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I just wanted to continue that I'm a homeowner whose property abuts the 415 West Washington, which is a contaminated site in the floodplain and floodway, which people before me have been discussing. I'm not a scientist or a flood expert, but I do have some common sense enough to know that a toxic site in a floodway is a potential catastrophe. As you know, the city has known about the contaminants on this site for a long time, and yet there has been no cleanup. Now we're finding out that there are even more contaminants, as well as a toxic plume on this site, not only in our neighborhood, but across the street from the Ann Arbor YMCA, where our children, our friends, our grandparents frequent. Why aren't people yelling from their rooftops to have this toxic site cleaned up now? The city's solution to this urgent situation is to try and find a developer who will build a 70-foot tall building to house hundreds of residents in a toxic floodplain and floodway. It makes no sense to me, other than this push to develop without consequences. And the responsibility for this cleanup should not depend on or wait on some unknown developer who may or may not purchase this contaminated site in a flood area. Who knows how long that process will take? This is urgent for the health and well-being of our entire community, and it needs to be addressed yesterday. How much will this cleanup cost? We have yet to be given any concrete numbers. Has the city tried to find alternative funding for the cleanup? I have not heard of any such inquiries. I'm hoping that with your knowledge and expertise, you'll be able to find some solutions or encourage the city to clean this site up now. I thank you very much for your time and would appreciate some advocacy on this issue.
Yeah, thank you for your input, Ms. McKenzie. Anybody else on the line, Sean?
We do not have any more hands raised.
Okay.
Excuse me, Sean, I do happen to know that someone was trying. Is there a possibility for you to tell if someone is on the line and unable to indicate?
I can look to see if you have the phone number, I can look to see if their number is in the list. We do also have a hand raised now, but
okay.
I can look for the number that you have.
If that's a new number, then that's probably the right one. I don't know.
It's a number ending in 464. Again, that's number is 464. You should be now able to speak.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes,
yes.
we can hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. That was me. I'm on a phone, and for some reason the *9 wasn't working, but I think I finally managed to get it to work. So thank you so much. You got such a big agenda. Oh, my name is Linda Barauer, and I live at 421 3rd Street. And you've got such a big agenda. I hope you will allow me to talk briefly on all 3 items. I'm so happy to see the pollinator habitat resolution. In addition to recommending less frequent mowing and keeping lawns 6 to 8 inches in spring and reduced raking and leaf cleanup in fall, I would suggest it could be strengthened by specifying that delayed cleanup means not just leaving the leaves in place, but also not cutting down dead stems and seed heads in the fall, and explicitly recommending that those actions should be delayed and delayed mowing in spring until after a week of 50-degree temperature, so as not to disturb the many pollinators that overwinter in dry plant material. And I understand there were some complaints last year about no mow May, but there was also enthusiastic support for it in the community. And I just want you to be aware that there was amazing support and excitement over it. So going forward, I think the most important thing is that you recommend the city develop and promote fun and attractive educational materials about how to preserve pollinator habitat and discouraging the use of pesticides and artificial fertilizers. As far as the gas ban, I totally support banning it in new construction. And I know planning staff brought a very creative solution to Planning Commission recently. They proposed doing it via our zoning code, since the state doesn't allow it, via our building code. And it's really important to find a way to do this via our zoning rules as soon as possible. It seems that every week a massive new development is approved with gas hookups that will produce more emissions than the emissions reduced by any reduction in commuters from the resulting density or the actions taken so far under our A20 plan. So if we're serious about the A20 plan, it doesn't make any sense to allow gas hookups in new construction. And responsible builders are doing the right thing in new developments in Ann Arbor right now, which shows that it is possible. The other builders just need to follow suit, and just asking politely hasn't gotten the results. So I hope you will recommend City Council put some teeth into a gas ban for new construction. And then lastly, the floodplain. I'm looking forward to Jerry Hancock's presentation tonight. I personally think the city should adopt a policy of no new building in floodplains, period, certainly not on properties it owns. As somebody else stated, the city's buying floodplain properties and tearing down stuff to open up the floodplain. So we shouldn't be building new stuff on properties we already own that are in the floodplain. And I think the Environmental Commission needs to, hopefully will support our floodplain coordinator's advice on this and recommend such a thing to council. Just one more point. From today's PowerPoint presentation, it seems that the greatest floodplain in the city is in Allen's Creek, which isn't surprising. And I want to point out there are 3 city-owned parcels in Allen's Creek, 415 West Washington, 721 North Main, and First and William. And of these, there's an active proposal to put hundreds of new units on the 415 site. So a broad floodplain resolution is really critical right now. And at a recent city council meeting while debating developing 415 West Washington, when asked about flood insurance, I think an incomplete answer was given by staff. So I hope that tonight you will ask you'll ask Jerry Hancock to explain how flood insurance can be decreased citywide, because the city participates in a commuting rating system, which gives us credits for doing above and beyond the minimally required floodplain requirements. I can, if you give me just one more minute, what he said in a
I'm sorry, you've got a baby 15 seconds.
Okay, I just want to please ask Jerry that. Yeah, I'll wrap it up. I just want to I hope somebody will ask Jerry that question about how we can reduce flood insurance rates citywide by going above and beyond what we're currently doing, just minimally in floodplain management. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your input, Ms. McKenzie. Anybody else, Sean?
We do not have any other hands raised at the moment.
Okay. All right, well, this ends the first period of public commentary. There'll be another period at the end of this meeting. So there is no unfinished business today. So we'll move on to the new business. And the first item up is discussion of risks and management of new and existing construction in the floodplain area, which will begin with a presentation by Jerry Hancock.
Hi, thank you for inviting me tonight. So I was asked to put together a presentation to get a conversation started. So I have a short presentation. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
All right. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jerry Hancock. I'm the Stormwater and Floodplain Programs Coordinator in the Systems Planning Unit. I've been at the city for almost 33 years, and during that 33 years, floodplain management has been part of my responsibility the whole time. In addition to my work at the city, I'm also the executive director of the Michigan Stormwater Floodplain Association, which is the statewide association of floodplain managers. So I'm going to go through, this will be kind of a basic floodplain management presentation just to get conversations going. Since this is your meeting and you asked me to come, if you feel the need to interrupt me, please do. But otherwise, we can continue talking after the presentation. So floodplain, I'm going to go through a few of the terminologies. So a floodplain is made up of two parts. There's actually more parts than that, but two main parts, the floodway and the flood fringe. The floodway is where water moves with a destructive force. There are more regulations in that area. And then the flood fringe, the water sort of piles up and recedes. And you'll hear the term 100-year storm. That is not really used by FEMA anymore. It's really the 1% annual chance. Our flood maps that we have come from FEMA. In addition to the maps themselves, there's a study that goes along with the maps that shows much more detail about flood elevation. This is what a FEMA flood map looks like, but FEMA also provides us with the digital files. So what you see on the city's website and then also internally our GIS, it draws from the exact same information that's on the FEMA web flood maps. To give you a sense of how much floodplain there is in the city of Ann Arbor, it represents about 10% of the city. Now, given a lot of that is the Huron River. But as far as structures go, there are about 500, a little more than 500 structures in the floodplain. And the majority of those are in Allen Creek and its branches. So there was some questions that came up about flood insurance. So flood insurance is required if a structure is in the floodplain and there is a federally backed mortgage. So that's different than if the property is in the floodplain. The flood insurance is required for structures. The National Flood Insurance Program, however, is currently $20.5 billion in debt. This number has stayed consistent for the last few years. But as a result, Congress is continually looking at ways to improve this program because obviously it wouldn't be in debt if it were a solid program. So there have been several efforts to make reforms to it. Particularly in 2012, there was a major overhaul, but then people didn't like the results and screamed loudly enough to get Congress to undo the changes. And they were trying to move towards getting rid of subsidies and move towards actuary rates, and they're still moving in that direction. But then last year, FEMA implemented the first new pricing methodology. It's called Risk Rating 2.0. So the way that the rates are figured out is completely different than they were for the past 40 years. And that's the first time that they've changed the methodology since the implementation of the program. Within the National Flood Insurance Program, there is a program that was mentioned by one of the callers. It's called a community rating system, and they do offer the ability to lower flood insurance rates for communities to go above and beyond the minimum standards. This chart represents like what the result of the program is. So it's a point system, and the more things that you do that go above and beyond minimum standards, the more points you get. And communities start out at a class 10, you go from the bottom to the top. And as you get more points, each class, there is a corresponding reduction in insurance rates for every policy in the community. We are currently at a class 6 with off to the side there, you can see we have 2,343 points, which gets us a 20% discount. I put a little plus there because we actually got a few more points for the most recent hazard mitigation plan that aren't represented there. And the way it's a very complicated system, and it may take a little while before those are represented. We didn't get enough points to get us to the next level, but we're getting pretty close. So I just mentioned hazard mitigation plan. So the way that communities get mitigation money from FEMA, you have to have a flood mitigation plan or a hazard mitigation plan to be eligible for mitigation money. It's also a way for communities to prioritize or identify different mitigation methods or projects. So we started this effort in 2007 with the first flood mitigation plan, and then FEMA changed the way that the mitigation planning works and changed it to require all hazard plans. And these plans expire every 5 years. So you can see we've been on a path of 2007, 2012, 2017, and then just in November of last year, we adopted our latest hazard mitigation plan. That's because they expire every 5 years. So here are a few things that have been accomplished since 2007. Well, we got new maps, and one thing I want you to notice about all of these take a very long time. Floodplain management you have to be in it for the long haul. Just getting new maps, the FEMA process, you can see it took 7 years. But once we had the first flood mitigation plan in place, we were eligible to apply for FEMA grants. And so I worked on a couple different grants, the 219 West Kingsley. That is also, people call it the fish park. We received a FEMA grant for that. And then there were also a couple structures that we tore down at 721 North Main. Now, when FEMA gives grant money for that, in return, you have to deed restrict the property. That's their incentive to give you money. They want to know that you're not going to build buildings in the floodplain. And then there was a long effort to join the community rating system. Oops. And we actually joined at a class 7, and then through some additional effort improved to a class 6, and we're continuing to try to improve that. And one of the major recommendations of the hazard mitigation plans was to do a floodplain management overlay district, and we're finally successful at implementing that in January of 2021. And then probably the biggest project, at least money-wise, that came out of the hazard mitigation planning was doing the Allen Creek Railroad berm opening. And I can talk about that later if people have questions about that. But that project was actually identified in the 2007 plan. So even though I wrote here 2015 to present, 15, that's when we started getting a FEMA grant, but the effort actually started in 2007. So it's a very long project. This is just if you're not familiar with, this is a map showing some floodplain and where the Kingsley Fish Park is at, a couple buildings that we tore down on 721 North Main, and where the Allen Creek berm opening project is at the mouth of Allen Creek. So I was asked to touch base on changing weather patterns. Now, I know that most of you probably already know most of this stuff, but temperatures are increasing, which is causing precipitation to increase in both in frequency and intensity, which results in increase in runoff. This chart, while it's 10 years old, it documents the increase in both temperature and precipitation from 1951 to 2012. So during that period, there was a 41% increase in the 1% annual chance floods and a 44% increase in annual precipitation. This is a stat from long-term stat from the city here in the city of days that we received over 2 inches of rain. And while it's all up and down, you can tell the general trend is moving up. And then here's some storm events. I put this together based on, actual events that happened here in Ann Arbor. And so the side where it says percent annual chance, just so you know, 1% annual chance, that's what people call the 100-year event. A 10% would be a 10-year event. A 4% would be a 50-year, and a 2%, a 4% is a 25-year, and a 2% is a 50-year. And the takeaway from this is that these storms happen way more often than what the year storm would suggest. So just looking at the 10-year storm between 2009 and 15, like we had, was 6 10-year storms in a 7-year period. And I put this 2014 on here because we actually had flood damage from this 1-year event that particular year. So some people thought it was a bigger event than what it was. So to just support that idea that the size storms that we're getting are getting larger, NOAA is the ones who determine the flood predictions or the size of storms. They figure out what a 100-year 12-hour storm is, and they have these fantastic charts. But using that 1% annual chance, the old numbers, which were based from their previous estimates in 1992 to the new ones that we're using now, which are now 10 years old. But in 2013, there was a 17% increase in the size of a 100-year storm event. Our current maps are actually based on the older values. And then this is just to drive home that not only can we say that storms are getting bigger, but the actual amount of flood damage in Michigan, you can see the trend here. Well, this goes back a long ways, but starting in the 90s, the trend just starts moving up, which kind of matches the increase in storm events too. So the city we have a calibrated stormwater model of all the creek sheds within the city. And you don't need to read any of the numbers on here. But what this chart is showing is that the top section lists the amount of acres, buildings, and parcels in the floodplain on the FEMA maps. The second or middle part lists the numbers from the city's model, what we're predicting. And there are a few major differences. We used newer storm amounts, we used actual flow, and we used better contour information. And then the bottom part shows the difference. And the point of this slide is that the difference, all those numbers are positive. There are no negative numbers. So our model predicts that everywhere within the city that the floodplain is ultimately larger. That may not mean on every parcel it's larger, or even in each creekshed, but at least portions of the floodplain in each creekshed, there's some area that's larger. So one of the things in the stormwater model that we're able to do, or we had our consultant do when we first put it together, is we put various scenarios together. We have this one, we call it the future scenario. So we took every single family home and said, that yard has a rain garden. All private property, all U of M property Let's say pretend it's redeveloped to meet our current stormwater standards, and then all streets are revised to or redeveloped to be green streets. What would the floodplain look like? So the result was, we know there'd be a major improvement in water quality and significant reduction in flooding for smaller events, basically up to about the 10-year event. But the 100-year or 1% annual chance looks about the same. So in other words, we can't build ourselves out of the floodplain. The floodplain management is not, the need for it is not going to go away. I mentioned the floodplain management overlay zoning district. I just want to go through two different aspects of it. There's lots of different aspects of it about how high you build and what the threshold for when things kick in change. But there are some prohibitions for the floodway and for the flood fringe. And I've mentioned the floodway is the area where it's more dangerous, more destructive. So within the floodplains, we now prohibit critical facilities, new residential uses, new buildings, additions, increases in enclosed floor area, creating habitable space. That would be like, this happens all the time where someone wants to put bedrooms in a basement, egress windows and doors, accessory structures without foundations like trailers, toilets, because toilets run continuously during a flood and send all the flood water to the water treatment plant or the wastewater treatment plant. We prohibit fill, and then parking lots. There's some limitations to when parking lots are allowed, but mostly we don't allow parking lots. And then this is the limitations on the flood fringe. So there are fewer limitations, but critical facilities are prohibited, structures without foundations, egress windows, and toilets. And that is kind of a little overview of floodplain management. So I can take questions. If necessary, we can pull up flood maps if you want to look at those, or we could just go from things on the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Yeah, please raise your hand using that feature in Zoom. John, you have your hand up, and then Dharma Ackman.
Thanks, Jerry. We appreciate your service and excellent presentation. I've got 3 quick questions that I'll just fire away, and hopefully you can answer them quickly. First of all, I thought that the city's flood maps had been changed from a 1% annual change chance to a 500-year, and you referenced the 100-year several times, or the 1%, and I'm wondering what the status of that is. And I'm wondering if on slide 18, the model delineated is based on the 0.2% or the 1%. On slide 8, you talk about a special flood hazard area. I'm wondering if you can explain to us what that is. And then I'm wondering if some of the callers talked about construction or no construction at a particular site in the floodplain, and whether that would, and that might release toxins. And I'm wondering if whether there's construction or no construction, whether that has any impact whatsoever on the release of any contaminants in the soil. Those are the 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay. So our maps, the flood maps do show the 1%, and they also show the 500-year, which is called the 0.2%. It's just that there are very few regulations related to the 0.2%. So we don't talk about it very much, because in city code, we don't have any regulations in that area. And in the building code, there are some critical facilities are required to be elevated above the 0.2%. One of the things in our regulations at the city, since the building code requires critical facilities to be elevated above the 0.2%, we have now required that for all buildings. So any building that has to be elevated, the height now would need to be elevated above the 0.2%. And it's actually 1 foot above that. The building code is 1 foot above the 1%. So, sorry, I had that map up there. Where'd that go? So on this particular map, the red shows the floodway, the orange shows the 1%, and the yellow shows the 2%. And that's right from FEMA. That's on the FEMA maps already. So it does show both. And you ask about our model, what our model is based on. Our model is based on all storms. You can put any size storm into it and get an answer showing that particular storm. For our analysis of how our model compares to the FEMA model, we only compared it to the 1%, just because that's where most of the regulations revolve around the 1%. And even flood insurance. Flood insurance isn't required beyond the 1%. So like on this map here, the areas between the orange and the yellow, flood insurance wouldn't be required. So it's just that we don't often show it because there's so little regulation within it. And then you ask about the special flood hazard area. That's just a FEMA term for any of these areas that we're showing. They're all special flood hazard areas. If it has a flood zone, it's a special flood hazard area. And then your question about toxins, I am definitely not the right person. Contamination is not my area of expertise. I really wouldn't be able to answer that accurately. It is common for floodplain managers to talk about vehicles parked in the floodplain, because it's just like, sort of like common sense. If there's oils and stuff on the vehicles, it will get into the floodwaters and cause pollutants.
Thank you.
Let's see, Dharma had her hand up, but Rita, I don't know what happened to her. Your hand is up, Rita.
My question was answered. It was about the
Oh,
500 year. So
Okay.
thank you.
So Rita, your hand is up. You have the
Thank
floor.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. So I'll try and do mine as a sequence as well. And my first question has to do with the community rating system. And if we're currently at a class 5 that influences our community rating system for insurance. What if we went to a class 6? What would be the outcome of that in terms of what it would affect on the insurance rates?
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to know, if you could just go over again the comment that you had about how we can't build our way out of this. So we've had improvements made, and we've got requirements on sites retaining the rain that falls on them for first flush, I believe it is. I'd like to understand that a little better. And then, I think this is my last one for now. The whole thing about it, the models that you've used are based on what FEMA has currently. Are there future projections that are available that would be useful to us now?
Let's talk about the CRS first. Let me find this chart here. Yeah. So we're actually at a class 6, and improving would go to a class 5. And the result would be we would lower the flood insurance by another 5% from, we currently get a 5% or 25%, I'm sorry, a 20% discount, and we would get a 25% discount.
Okay.
And we're fairly close. I mentioned that we have a few more points than is currently published. We're about 91 points. Getting points requires quite a bit, but we have enough. We have some things identified in the flood hazard mitigation plan that, over the next few years, if we implement those projects, we will more than likely get to a class 5.
Mhm.
The program is very complex, and there are some prerequisites to get past certain points. The prerequisites to get past a 5 would require that we regulate stormwater on a watershed basis, which is a great idea, but doesn't really fit in with Michigan's government structure, because we have so many different communities. We'd have to get everyone in each of the watersheds that touch Ann Arbor to all agree to regulate like we do. So it's not likely that we would ever get beyond a 5.
Okay. But we could get to 5. So
yes,
yeah.
Getting to 5 is within sight.
Right. And just relate while we're on that though, that when you say we, isn't that's those people who have flood insurance, right? So it applies to those people in the city who are required to have flood insurance based on their federally backed mortgage. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm saying I mean the city in general, but yes, the discount applies to every single policy within the city. So you don't have to be in the floodplain to get flood insurance. You can buy flood insurance no matter where you're at. It's only required if you're in the 1% annual chance flood area. Can you remind me what the other?
Sure. The you can't build your way out of it comment.
Right.
How do we take that? What do we?
So what I mean is like, so we do all this great stormwater mitigation work by requiring detention and for rain gardens and all, and green infrastructure. And we can make improvements to where we're not experiencing flooding in smaller events. But for these larger events, we're still going to have a floodplain that looks about like it does now. So I just mean you can't do enough stormwater management to make the floodplain go away.
Yeah. Okay. Is that it, Rita?
Just the projections for more intense and frequent storms, and how that is accommodated for in what we've looked at so far?
Well, our current maps are based on the 98 estimates that NOAA put out. So our current maps already use a smaller event. That doesn't necessarily mean that the floodplain's automatically lower. When FEMA does flood mapping, they come around to the communities and look for information. So next time they come around, we'll give them our flood model. And our flood model, we did actual measurements of flow in the storm system. And we found that there was a lot less flow in it than was used in the model. So they used a smaller event, but had higher flows. So that there are some things that balance out. And I say this knowing in particular for Allen Creek because of the berm opening project. We're trying to change the flood maps, and FEMA is going to make us go through a change for all of Allen Creek. And it's because our model shows that the floodplain within Allen Creek is a few inches lower than the FEMA model. Now, because we use better contour, there may be areas where even a lower floodplain would show a wider floodplain in some areas, but the flood elevation is going down a little bit. So FEMA said we have to chase that all the way out to the end of it. So that's an effort that's actually gonna we're going to be going through over the next year, is doing an update to the Allen Creek floodplain model, and it's not necessarily going up. It's going to go down slightly, but that's just the 100-year elevation would go down. Maybe that the 10-year goes up, but.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Sarah, you have the floor.
Hi, Jerry. Thank you for that presentation. I was particularly had questions on slide 4 and 5. I'm just kind of thinking about Allen Creek as a very special type of floodplain area, since it's not actually an open creek, it's a drain that's underground. So kind of comparing your modeling to the open creeks listed here, Mallett's Creek, Traver Creek, how are those inputs different? And I'm assuming it's taken into account that it's like a submerged drain versus a open river or creek.
Yes, that it is taken into account in the modeling. It's just a different type of model that's used in open creek versus an enclosed creek. It's a little more complicated to model an enclosed creek, but to give you a sense of scale, in an undeveloped watershed, the runoff that fills a creek, we call the bank full flood, and that equals about a 2-year event or a 50% chance event. In Allen Creek, because they basically enclosed the creek in the space that they had, that the creek took up, it acts just like a regular creek. Water is in the pipe and under the ground until we get rains of about a 2-year event. And then we start seeing surface flooding. So it's really not that different than any other creek. You just don't see it until the flooding starts. Whereas in an open creek, you can kind of see the water rising and then, oh my gosh, here it comes.
So are you saying like along the Allen Creek drain, like you actually will see surface water coming up when it's past that like 2-year flood?
Yes. Yep. So and there's a few areas where you'll start seeing it a little bit before that. Right next to the fish park at Kingsley and First is one of the areas. Depot Street.
Manhole covers blow up out of
the
roadway.
Yes, there's a few local low spots within that starts a little bit earlier, but generally you're going to start seeing surface flooding around a 2-year event in Allen Creek.
Okay, thanks. John, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thanks.
Jerry, can you comment from your perspective what the differences, if any, are between the former DTE site where the Broadway West development is going in, 721 North Main, and 415 West Washington? Because there's various types of developments that are approved or being considered for all 3 of those sites.
So comparing the various sites, so the DTE site, that's privately owned, so they simply need to follow our planning codes and building codes. I find that site particularly frustrating in that it's immediately downstream of a dam, but we don't have regulations around that, not at the state level or not at the local level. There were some recommendations that the state provided me that I provided to the developer, and they did change their building design to accommodate. To give you an example of if big walls holding up a building are perpendicular to the wave that would happen if a dam breaks, that would be particularly vulnerable, but if they're parallel to the flow, the likelihood of damage decreases. And so they changed some of their design based on those recommendations. So that was a positive thing. 721 North Main, that site, because we received a FEMA grant to remove structures, the floodway portion of that site is deed restricted and cannot be redeveloped. There is an effort right now to split off a small area of that site that's completely out of the floodplain. It's up on Summit Street to allow for affordable housing to happen there. That's completely fine from a floodplain standpoint because it's not in the floodplain. What happens with the rest of the site, we still have to decide, but the floodway portion of it, which here, I think I have that on one of the slides you can see here. Yeah, so the area in red, that portion of the site is deed restricted. And then 415 West Washington is, I don't have a map of that up here, but it's similar. It has floodway area and it has flood fringe area. And as you know, from my comments and from the callers, I wasn't supportive of that because it's contrary to the direction that I've been given by city council for the last, nearly 20 years of doing floodplain management since we started the first flood mitigation plan.
Mm-hmm. So let's see, given the time, let's be quick about any further Q&A on this topic. So Rita, you have your hand up. You're muted.
There I go. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think I wanted to just touch on one more point about residential in flood fringe areas, and the whole point of if federal funds aren't allowed for housing for affordable housing in flood fringe areas, just the whole, is there any difference for anyone to have residential in that same particular space?
Well, I think first you have to ask the question of, where do regulations come from? And so, for instance, the building code that we use is based on a national code, and there are, the building industry has say in what goes into those. And so that they, the building industry has say as to what goes into FEMA regulations. So it's building codes, and those regulations are regulating private development. And so I feel like those codes are only as strong as what the public, including the building industry, allows. To me, there's a huge difference between asking that question about land the city owns versus a private development. And land that the city owns, we should be following similar rules like what FEMA follows for themselves. So FEMA, the federal government, has rules that federal money can't be spent on development in the floodplain. I don't personally see why that would be any different for local communities. So I personally think there is a difference between private development and public lands, and that's based on what FEMA requires and what the National Flood Insurance recommendations are.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's see. So I think we'll move on to the next one, but I just have a few comments, Jerry. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all the data that you're presenting us and your expert opinion. I think everybody should. I think this is a topic that's going to come up repeatedly in the Environmental Commission over the next few years. And I just had one question, and that is, have the university just announced a large development upstream in Allen Creek there in Bell Field, I believe, right?
Mhm.
And so how much control does the city have? You know what I mean? You know,
Hi, Lisa, yeah.
hey, Lisa.
Sorry, I'm not trying to speak. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get the car unloaded. I'm listening to you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Hey, so how can the city be sure that whatever development's going to happen upstream in Allen Creek, you know, in land that I'm not sure the city can control what the university does. And how can the city be assured that they will not get extra flooding in Allen Creek downstream of that location? Because I know there has been flooding there before.
Yeah, absolutely. So this I may use this map to partially explain some of this. So first of all, the university is not subject to local zoning, and that's where the city's floodplain regulations are in zoning.
Mm-hmm.
They are subject to the building code, but they don't come to us for building permits. They get those through the state. So the university has to follow the building code. There's a couple other levels of difference. So the area that they're in actually, so if you can see the map that I have up here,
Mm-hmm.
The current floodplain, 100-year floodplain and floodway stop at Hill Street. And then there's a yellow area that goes beyond that. That's that 500-year or the 0.2%, where there aren't very many regulations.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're proposing to build. So as far as the building code goes, they just can't build or if they build a critical facility, it would need to be elevated higher than another facility. That's about the only regulation. But there's one other factor. The state of Michigan also regulates floodplains, but they only can regulate where the contributing area to the property that you're asking to build on is greater than 2 square miles. And the area where that building is proposed is less than 2 square miles. So the state doesn't have jurisdiction. So we have little jurisdiction, and the state has very little jurisdiction as far as floodplain management goes. But they do have to follow the building code.
Okay. All right. Well, last call for any questions. We could take one more. No, I don't hear and see any. So let's move on. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
But I'll just make one final comment that I urge everybody to read the city's hazard mitigation plan and in preparation for the next time the subject comes up. The next item on the agenda is a resolution in support of an accelerated action on an ordinance to ban natural gas connections in new construction and major renovations, and in support of devising and implementing interim measures to incentivize, I think, all electric construction. So let me put this attachment up during our discussion. I'll share my screen so that we can go through this. Yeah. Let's see, can everybody see that? Okay. All right, Rita, do you want to manage this discussion, or John? John,
I'll do a quick cut. If I could, I'll do a quick intro and then I'll pass it to John, if that's okay with you, John. I'm asked to discuss this item in the interest of the serious concern that we all should have, I think, and do have with the climate crisis that has been announced and identified this week by the IPCC as being really serious. And that our need for our community and for way beyond our limits is to reduce our carbon emissions as soon as possible, and to thereby at least attempt to affect the temperature raise that's affecting everything that we touch. So with that in mind, this was one area where we could have an effect that could outbalance the emissions related to new construction by just having that new construction not be carbon emitting in the long run. So there'd be a first burp, as I've heard it described, of carbon emissions during the construction, but afterward, that particular building should be clean from excess carbon emissions. So that's my intro. John, would you like to add anything in particular?
Sure. This resolution was drafted by Ken Garber. It was provided to me. I indicated that I was in favor of a resolution like this, and I added some content in the whereas clauses and added the second resolved clause. Just for some background information that many of you will know, the city approved the 31st natural gas connected project last Monday, since A20 was approved in June of 2020. So roughly one a month is being approved. We know that the city has been working at through various means to affect a natural gas ban or restrictions, put it that way. But right now, there is no information that I'm aware of in the public domain that indicates what the resolution date of that will be. We had talked about a joint energy and planning commission meeting last fall. It was finally scheduled in February. That was canceled. No new date has been issued. And so from, I think, the perspective of most people in the Energy Commission, by the way, we had a first reading of this. We did not take a vote. So I'm maybe being a little bit presumptuous to say that the Energy Commission is going to support this. I think it will. But I think the concern is that we need to, since we have an emergency, and since most entities, when there is an emergency, do everything they possibly can to implement measures, both interim measures and then finally a final solution, neither of which we have in place right now. That's why we have two clauses here, one asking that basically the city do everything it can to develop some type of ordinance banning natural gas connections, or limiting them to certain conditions. And then in the meantime, because this may not be implemented in the near term, and potentially if there is a solution that's put in place, it could be challenged legally. It's asking that the city look at interim measures that could be carrots and sticks based on, for example, as indicated here, restructuring of fees, priority processing, using different discretion when providing incentives, possibly even implementing a moratorium, and that would have to be defined, but doing something in the meantime so we don't continue to have roughly one new development a month that undermines the 820 plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty succinct. So, given the time constraints we're under here, I'm not sure we'll do a full reading of this at this point. And we're certainly not going to get to a vote. But let's have a discussion about it if anybody wants to raise a motion. Chris Graham? Do you want to have a discussion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Rita seconds it. Okay, so the floor is open for discussion. Chris, would you like to make a comment? You have the floor.
Generally supportive. Two questions. I have a heat pump. Have they evolved in the past 12 years so that they will run significantly below the freezing temperatures here?
Yes.
How far below?
Air-to-air heat pumps work quite well to about 5 degree F, but that depends on the quality of the envelope, obviously. So if you have a very leaky and poorly insulated envelope, then they have a harder time keeping up. If you have a very, very good envelope, for example, a passive house certified envelope, then air-to-air heat pumps work down into roughly the -10 to -15 F range.
Ah, okay. Second question, gas cooktops emit methane when they're off. I assume that applies to cooktops that have pilot lights, not the cooktops that are modern with good switching mechanisms and that are started by electricity. Correct or incorrect?
If I may address that, there are leaks in natural gas supply systems throughout the whole system. So even if you have a valve or if you have electronic ignition, you still have leaks. I don't know whether, I don't think there's any more or less of a leak if you have a pilot burning, but clearly you're combusting basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, etc. So you have more pollutants in the case of a pilot light stove. I'll let people ask more specific questions if they have them.
Please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Otherwise, I will not be able to see you. Anya, you have the floor.
Not a question, but just saying that I'm also, without having done as much reading on this as I would like, very much in favor. I do feel like the farther we go down this road, the harder it's going to be to undo what's being built, right? And I like the idea of, if we can't have an out and out ban, having there be, like it appears to be here, carrots and sticks, right? So where there's at least some sort of incentive and some discouragement to get the behavior that we're going for. So I think it's important we do as fast as we can.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Shannon. Oh, Dharma, and then Shannon.
I appreciate the fact that this brings up carrots and sticks. I think I actually mentioned that in my comments at a previous council meeting, especially carrots and incentives. And I guess I'm just thinking too, in terms of incentives, I think that there's an education gap. I noticed this when my husband and I, we're talking about heat pumps, and we talked to the person that installs our heater, and they told us it can't be done. Heat pumps don't work in this climate, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you're a traditional, the point I'm trying to give is, I know that's not accurate. I think that there is a big knowledge and skills gap for most traditional builders, I'm guessing, and what can be done. And so I'm wondering if there's room also for us to, create a set of materials or somehow have education be part of it, because I think that might be one of the biggest stumbling blocks of all.
Yeah, there's been a discussion for years about the city having a concierge service, where there would be, a central place where city residents could come, for advice about, about what's the current information about whatever question they may have, and also have a list of contractors that you can contact for estimates.
Yeah, and we're getting that shortly. I think that's great for residential, but I think it's a different scale when you're a developer. working with the whole contracting crew. So
Can I address that real briefly? The 2030 district is working on that. They have regular lunch and learns that's directed at the architect, developer, contractor community. One problem is that a lot of development in Ann Arbor is being done by developers outside of Ann Arbor, particularly the very large ones. And so anything that we might do locally is not necessarily going to do any kind of educational or have a significant impact on an architectural firm in New York working in development together with a big development firm in Chicago, for example, on a site here in Ann Arbor. But this is definitely an issue, and I can send something around later. We had a presentation in the Energy Commission meeting. I think it was in September or October of last year. We had a architectural firm and developer present projects that they've done in Pennsylvania and in the East Coast, and they're doing all electric, passive house certified projects at the same cost as code compliant projects. And that's not just a sample size of 3 or 5. That was a sample of 260 some developments. So I'll send that to this group.
All right, thank you, John. Dharma, you still have your hand up. Oh, okay, Shannon, you have the floor.
I just want to fill in folks a little bit on, and I don't know everything, but on what's happening, like part of why the meeting was canceled and things like that in terms of this moving forward. I think that staff has been stymied quite a bit in terms of their investigation with some of this, and it's not coming as fast as they want to. I am really glad that in here you put this carrot and stick thing, John, because I'm taking this back to Planning Commission with that in mind, because we're actively getting threatened with lawsuits now. We're getting letters as part of our communication package that comes from different home builders associations, different people signing on to it, different developers. It's just the list is getting longer and longer. And so it is a real thing. And we don't want to also just blow money by, getting tied up in court with a bunch of this stuff too. So we have to be prudent. But I think that it may be time to still keep that goal in mind, but to shift over to the carrot stick thing to just so that we can get something done. Because it just feels like the larger, just banning all natural, it's going to be very difficult, and it feels like a hostile environment in terms of kind of what we're getting from the outside world. So I'm really glad you put this together, and I'm taking this back to Planning Commission in terms of that. So I really appreciate you putting that time and energy into developing this. Thank you for your work on this.
Yep, thank you, Shannon. Sarah, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Hi, thank you. I guess I also wanted to echo some of what Shannon said. I have been getting negative feedback from citizens on using the term ban. Definitely like carrot and stick, there's a lot of environmental policy precedent for that working. Thinking of cap and trade and controlling sulfate, that reduced acid rain outputs. So, I'm definitely like more of a carrot and stick person. And I've seen that work. Whereas the term ban, I think, does send red alarms, and legally seems like a little bit harder to pull off. So I would echo that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rita, you have the floor.
Just a question on the timing issue. So at one point there was a thought to have a time indicated on when this would be in effect, so that it would be sort of ahead of the curve for current projects that are in the pipeline. And I just wonder if that's something that would be helpful in addition to the carrot and stick thing that could possibly be implemented now. Isn't there a point where we would say from this date forward, we would have this expectation? Is there anybody that can answer that?
I don't know that I'm totally qualified to answer that, but I think you can't say like in anticipation of it has to be code, and it's an enormously long and complicated process, unfortunately. So it and just so you all realize too, like any what they call planned unit development, which is basically developers asking for kind of more than what is typical, and kind of there's sort of public benefit involved in everything. Every one of those projects coming through now are all electric, because they know that if we have any possibility to push them legally, we are, in terms of getting them to perform. And we've had quite a few of those. But things that are, quote, by right, we don't. And we push them and we ask and we plead, but we can't do anything about it. And so we can't say like, oh, we think, within a year it's going to happen. I think word has traveled very quickly within the development community about sort of what people can expect. I know staff has been very good at alerting people as early in the process as they have the opportunity to, because, people don't come to them before they, have any idea of what they're doing. And one of the things that is really tricky about this is that, the kinds of projects that John is talking about in terms of, comparable cost, all that sort of thing, that's because from the very beginning, the architect and designers and team is focused on that as the end goal. And you cannot add it on later in the game. And
right.
So
and that's why I was thinking
so
a date.
Important.
Sorry.
No, I know we just can't, we can't code wise, we just can't do that. And I think, again, word is getting out. That's why we're getting all these letters essentially from people. The word is getting out, but it's my understanding, I'm not a planner, but or a lawyer, but it's my understanding that we couldn't just kind of say, we know it's going to be coming in a year and a half, so get ready, or something like that. It really has to be vetted in code, and that just takes an achingly long time. And it's very frustrating, I think, for many of us that want to be able to change things.
And you're talking state code or city code?
That's part of the issue, is that we rely, I think it's Michigan building code and not national building code, like Jerry was kind of alluding to. And so, right now, this, I think, should be one of the lobbying things that we talk about, later today too, is sort of how to be able, because it really has to happen at the state level. It's going to be difficult to get that to happen.
Well, it was already,
But that's one of the, but you can't start too early in terms of just getting that voice out there to be able to start to turn the conversation in that direction.
Yeah, it was already one of the primary asks of that city council passed in last December to enable us to do that. So John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody that the IPCC issued a new report on Monday. Early reports never mentioned stopping fossil fuel burning and development. And now the last two reports have. And they make it very explicit that we have to stop putting in assets that essentially lead to the burning of fossil fuels. And what we're talking about with all of this are fixed assets. It's not a matter of not doing something for a year and having a year's loss of emissions. These are fixed assets that are going to be in place in the case of furnaces and things like that, 15 to 20 years. And in the case of boilers and other things like that, many times these are in place for 50, 70 years. So I think I understand and share Sarah's concerns. That's why there is a statement in here banning natural gas connections with extremely limited exceptions. But I want everybody to realize why we're asking for this. It's because the science tells us that we need to do this. And remember, the IPCC report is a consensus report of 195 countries. So that means countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia and others, the scientists are agreeing that we need to stop putting fixed assets in place.
Hear, hear. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the question is, we should put this on the agenda for our next meeting as well in April. I think given the urgency of the situation and the turgid nature of our political process, let's put it on the agenda for, put it on the agenda for a second reading and a vote for our next meeting. Okay? Does everybody agree with that? Okay. All right, thank you. So let's move on to the next topic, which is policy recommendations for 2024. Has everybody seen, the city council passed a set of policy recommendations last December, so we reviewed that, and I think most of us have, I hope, and then we asked for questions for supplemental ones that might not have shown up on that document. So Dharma, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that we skipped the pollinator habitat resolution.
Oh my God, you're right. I'm getting cross-eyed. All right, I'm sorry, let's do the pollinator. Sorry, Rita, let's get this, I'll get that up on my screen.
Thank you. And thanks, Dharma. I just want to make sure, it would be really great for us to go through this. I want to, first of all, thank my commission colleagues, Anya and Bridget and Dharma, even though we haven't been able to make some of our meetings. I know you've been a supporter of us moving forward in a different way from what we did last year. We had a No May project that took place across the city that was very popular, as you heard from one of our callers today. And the goal of this is to modify it based on some feedback that we've had from staff, and also to make it a pollinator supporting resolution that addresses the kind of like the life cycle, the seasonal life cycle of pollinators, so that we are talking about spring activities, but also fall, where we talk about leaves. So that all of those things are related, important for supporting pollinator health and survival. This is also presented in the interest of supporting the climate crisis, because we also know that pollinators are at risk, and because of their importance in biodiversity, we do need to support them. And so we can do many things here in the city, and this resolution asks for that kind of support. That is my general introduction. If any of my colleagues, Anya or Bridget, would like to add something in particular, I'd be happy to have your comments. Anya?
Yeah, I was just going to add that that the intention of writing the resolution as it is to sort of broaden out, so it's not just looking at sort of no mow May. It's more like year round, and it's more than just not mowing. It's sort of the bigger picture of sustainable land and landscape management, and written in a way that hopefully, if it gets approved, it just is and doesn't have to be revisited over and over based on the season.
Yeah, and I should mention in this context that this was written in shorthand. So when we're saying that Ann Arbor City Council will do something, we really mean that we're going to ask City Council to direct the city administrator to do something. So just in case somebody has a concern about that right now. So let's see, we do have quite a few resolve clauses here. So let's see, I firmly believe that we should have a first reading of all of these and then come back with a better draft the next time. And so hopefully we'll have time for this in the next month or two. So
I think the issue is we're trying to get this passed in time for spring, which is already here.
As yeah, I realize that.
Point taken. As I'm reading this, though, I am noticing that this is written like a resolution that's ready for City Council instead of a resolution that the Environmental Commission would pass. Mm-hmm. I wonder if we can make amendments.
We can make. Yep, we should be able to make amendments right now.
So yeah.
Sorry, I'll just say, Steve, I do have a version that has been amended that I can share on my screen if that works.
Okay. Well, I'm going to stop sharing then.
Steve, should we get a motion to consider and
Yeah.
that formality, get that out of the way?
Yeah, we can do that. So do I have a motion to consider this resolution? For discussion and a vote today, John Mursky and then Brooks Curtis. Seconded. All who approve, say aye.
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 Hands up. Any no's? I hear none. So let's proceed with the discussion. And the way I like to do these things is let's go through the resolve clauses and fix them up, and then go back and see if the whereas clauses are sufficient to support the resolve clauses. So let's see. Can we do a global search to replace that? The resolve that the Environmental Commission recommends that City Council direct the city administrator. I guess this is not an editable copy, is it? It's a PDF file.
Yes, this is in PDF. I can open a Word document so that we can make changes if that would be helpful.
Oh yeah, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Give me a second to pull that up.
Sure. Yeah, while he's doing that, I mean, we post these as PDF files in Legistar before the meeting, but we'll need to include a Word file or some other word processing program version to do these edits. So I'm proposing a friendly amendment that we do that search and replace in the resolve clauses. Is that do I have that was my motion. Is there a second one? Okay, Shannon seconds that. So
it's friendly unless someone objects.
Yep, I don't hear any objections, so
It's friendly.
Yep. So we'll go ahead.
Progress on amendments to chapter 40 while we're waiting. Any news?
Any news about that? Lisa, do you have any? Do you know anything about those amendments with chapter 40?
I'm kind of the point person now, and I've been talking with Sean and Missy, but I basically am just trying to figure out what the next step is. We want staff to be able to review it. It's going to take some time, I think, to work through, and I'm just waiting to hear about next steps. So as soon as I have them, I will let you know.
Yeah, it's frustrating that it was lost in the legal department for a year.
Yeah, it probably should have gone through staff first. I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
Steve, sorry, could you repeat what we are replacing with?
Oh, that the Environmental Commission recommends City Council direct the city administrator to, or encourages, to encourage. Yeah, that's good. All right. So there were 4 of them, and
we did have slightly different wording down here in this resolved clause that Ann Arbor City Council directs the city administrator to prepare. I assume here we're just adding on the Environmental Commission recommends that Ann Arbor City Council. Okay.
Yeah.
While we're waiting, can I tell you an interesting fact that I learned at a conference about pollinators?
Yeah.
Which is that our cities are actually doing better for pollinator habitat than rural areas are because of the incredible amount of pesticide use in farmlands. So this is so important to make these kinds of changes happen within our city because they may become refuges. So.
Thanks, Shannon. So let's see, Rita, you have your hand up, and then John.
No, my hand is no longer up.
Oh, okay. So John Mursky, then John Calloward.
Yeah, I'm only going to repeat what I thought was a good suggestion that was given during public comment, and something about maintaining seed heads. And there was some comment about X number of days above 50 degrees. And I think we might want to indicate something that be for native plants. I don't know that we want to do that for invasives or other types of non-native plants. So maybe that could be added somewhere into a resolve clause, or added as a resolve clause, because it may be something specific and unto itself and not really fit with the other ones. But I thought that was a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Can I respond to that? And maybe Rita might want to respond to that too, but I'm wondering if that, I mean, I think the plan around this is to set a structure, but there's going to be more detailed educational materials throughout the year. And I'm wondering if that's better put in there than in this resolution, but I guess that's up to you all.
If I may respond to that, I think that might be better and give us more flexibility as we move forward, because our goal is to prepare a communication plan and to work with staff on that, so that we do have actually more than one way to provide education, I'm hoping, to the community, more than what we had available to us last year during the No Mow May period. So I'm hoping, I mean, that's a big ask, but yeah, I think that's the kind of detail that we would put in the materials.
So this is just a friendly question or suggestion. So pollinators don't adhere to city boundaries. So is there space in here for something about regional cooperation or something with the state? I know we may address this in the policy discussion coming up, but I'm just wondering about encouraging collaboration, regional collaboration.
I think that's a great idea. I'm not sure exactly where to move it in.
Well, let's see. What are the government agencies that would do that kind of thing? I'm thinking about the metro parks.
The county certainly would be.
County.
And
the county or SEMCOG.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the road commission.
County and state, right?
Yeah. So do I have a proposal here? Do I have a proposal?
Could we say within in the middle of this big resolved, and I already lost it. Okay, so the pollinators working group of the Environmental Commission with input from city staff and from regional partners.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Then, right, and then we'll seek them out.
Okay, Anya, you have your hand up, and then Dharma, and then Chris.
I just forgot to lower mine.
Okay.
After my last input. Yeah.
So are any other friendly amendments suggested? I don't hear or see anything. Chris, you have your hand up. Dharma?
Well, is this going to be first reading? Do I have some time to work on something before the next meeting?
Yeah, of course.
Or are you wanting this done today, Rita?
It would be really great if we could move it to city council so that we're still in spring, unless, let me look at Sean, sort of like, how do we get this moved out so that we start our communication process? That's really
okay, so
the important thing.
Could Chris make his suggestions to council members so that we approve it tonight and then it goes to them and then they may modify this anyhow?
Yeah, I think that's prudent.
That's good.
So the subject area is native plantings. Many of you know what a black swallowtail is. I think they have 3 only species of native to this area plants that they rely upon to deposit their eggs to make caterpillars and then ultimately replace the pollinator stock. If those native plantings aren't around, you don't have black swallowtail butterflies. And a lot of the pollinator enthusiasm is related to planting non-native flowers that are gorgeous and draw lots of non-native bees, and pollinators gather in there. Our native pollinators gather in there, but they do not lay eggs on those plants. And so maybe one part of this could be some sort of manual, simple manual that lists our great native pollinators, bees and butterflies, and these are the native plants that they need to reproduce, and meanwhile feed birds. So I don't know how to do that succinctly right off my hand, but if there's a way to beef up that one resolve clause, I'd appreciate it. I can work on it.
So I'm right. I'm thinking that the kind of thing beyond what you're suggesting, Chris, is in the range of the communication plan.
Absolutely.
That we would want to have ongoing. You know, I hope that it gets review and change all the time, actually, and reference to external important groups that have good information.
But something like resolve that since native plants are vital to the maintenance of populations of native pollinators, they are very important to encourage people to plant them and use them.
Yeah, that would be more properly in a whereas clause, Chris, I think.
Whereas. Okay. Me up there. Something simple that a lot of people are not catching, that it's the native plants that really we need to work at, not just flowering, not just flowers.
So are people comfortable with the resolved clauses as they're written?
I did add in this, the Environmental Commission recommends that in the final resolve clause. That was in Rita's version that I received.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Sean. Okay. Has everybody had enough time?
Well, maybe this is where Chris's resolved goes, right? So we've got the reference to leaves, so there could be one that's separate, that's specific to the native plants. And if we put in something rough, could that then go to City Council for help?
Well, we don't have to spell out all the details. Yeah. I think as long as it covers and it should be succinct, but accurate, you know.
There we go. I like that.
So Dharma, you have your hand up.
I think I'm getting a little bit lost. So don't we already say in the resolve clause that we're encouraging property owners to increase diverse native plantings?
It's right there.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. I think I would just encourage that we don't try to we try to keep this, I think like someone else was saying, succinct and save the detail for educational, promotional materials during the year.
Yeah.
The starting resolution did have a lot more detail, and then we worked with people to shrink it down because we figured we'll put all that information into the communication plan. So.
Okay. So let's see, Chris, you have your hand up still, and then Shannon.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Shannon, you have the floor.
Just briefly, I'm pretty comfortable with where this is. One thing I just think that's worth thinking about is kind of rebranding it in terms of the No Mow May thing. I just feel like there's so much more we could do besides that. And not mowing doesn't really do a whole lot for pollinators. It's really like willows and early blooming things that don't really bloom in lawns. And so it's really catchy, and other people are using it, so I get that. But as part of how you all continue forward, I would just like to see you think about another snazzy name that maybe gets at it in a way that is more real and comprehensive, because leaving up your dandelions doesn't for pollinators. It really doesn't. And that's really what came up in my yard by not mowing for a month. So to be perfectly honest, and I had to mow it 3 times in order to be able to get in control again. And so there's that issue as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I would really like to rethink. You don't have no mow may written in here,
Right.
Which I was glad to see. But as you all move forward with your educational stuff, I challenge you to be able to come up with a really great slogan that doesn't tie you to something that is not as effective as it could be.
We are working on it, and we are open to ideas.
Great.
Well, let's see. So is everybody happy with the resolve clauses now? And I understand the pollinators work group worked on these whereas clauses and that they have reduced them appropriately. And let's just scan through those quickly from the top. Well, let's see. How do we know that the city council recognizes that bees and other pollinators? Have they made a statement to that effect?
Why don't we just say the Environmental Commission and
Yeah.
that we're safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that sounds good. Second clause, or any other comments for the first clause? How about the second? I think that's a pretty comprehensive list. Okay, how about the third? Yep, that's good. Has the city encouraged integrated pest management practices?
We do have a webpage up about it.
The city does, yep, that's right. Research suggests that bees and other pollinators make use of less intensively maintained lawn spaces. I'm not sure what that means. By less intensively maintained. Does that mean
like not pesticides, mowing it to 1 inch every week?
Yeah, like no monoculture.
That was the terminology that was used.
Yeah, like no monocultures. Something like that. Okay. All right, then reduced frequency of mowing has been shown to have a direct and indirect benefits to pollinator species, including availability of more floral resources, less production of emissions from fossil fuel powered equipment, reduced noise from powered equipment, reduced compaction of soil, and associated improved stormwater infiltration. Yep, that seems pretty complete to me. The next one is, whereas research suggests that pollinators and other invertebrates rely on fallen leaves for cover and insulation from the elements during winter months. That's a great consideration as well. Any comments so far? No?
The only thing with that one is that a big part of native bee egg laying in the winter is actually in the hollow stems of native plants. And so it might be nice to kind of put that in there. It's not just, the leaves aren't really a lot where the native bees lay their eggs. It's more in the hollow stems.
Yeah.
And so to put that in there also indicates that, hey, maybe I should leave my native grasses up through the winter. And so maybe there's a way to work that in.
Yeah, let's put that in. That's definitely a major point. Yep, that's excellent. Thanks, Sean. Okay. Everybody happy with that? Okay, now pollinators and floral resources have a positive relationship in which an increase in pollinator populations can increase the amount of flora and vice versa. Now we can get rid of that terminal and. All right, so any comments on that one? Lisa.
Would it be accurate to say flora and food? I mean, and I'm not trying to be anthropocentric, but people are self-interested.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. Food for birds and food for people. Increase the amount of flora and foods.
Not committed to it, just suggesting it. I'd rather, I'd rather hear from the experts in this.
I like it.
I like it, but what does the pollinator working group think? Anybody?
Well, there's
okay. I think we're good with that language. Thank you, flora and food. And okay, the last whereas clause, the Ann Arbor City Council. Well, that would be.
I think I could probably say environmental commission, probably, and then.
Yeah, the environmental commission. Yeah, well, yeah, thanks. I think that seems to cover all the considerations. Lisa, you still have your hand up. Do you? Oh, okay. All right. So, do I have a motion to close discussion? John, seconded by Bridget. All right. Well, let's bring this to a vote. Do I have a motion to, let's see, all who approve of this resolution as written, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so this resolution passes unanimously. And so Sean, would you please forward this to City Council?
I will, thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Thanks, everybody. So let's see, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion of policy recommendations for 2024. So I can bring those up, Sean, if that's helpful. And these are just suggestions that came through the working groups. So the floor is open to anything. But let's go through this systematically so we can try to be efficient. We've all read what the city council passed in December, and we've reviewed what the commission has proposed for prior years. So the idea here was that I think most of us support what the city council submitted in December, but we thought of some other things that that would be important to protect the environment in Ann Arbor here. So why don't we start off with natural features? Chris, do you want to go through this quickly?
Oh.
And Brooks?
Go ahead, Brooks. I will.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Chris, I think the first one you should go through it because you understand that a lot more than I do.
So lots of folks understand what biodiversity means. In practical terms, as you look across the city or the state, there are hotspots. There are places where the hand of man has been limited, and the ability of native ecosystems and native species to thrive and survive and be sustained are better than most places. I thought it was 1988, but I guess Public Act 451 of 1994 asked the Department of Natural Resources to look at its entire land holdings and identify those places in the name of doing the best we can on a statewide basis of protecting our highly diverse native hotspots. The department several years later got down the road quite a ways. In fact, I have the shape files of all the places they found. And a senator from the UP found out about this and amended the law and replaced it with something that has to do with deer management. And I mean, things like reporting numbers and whatnot, nothing whatsoever to do with biodiversity. And for the first time since then, we have a legislature and a governor and even a local senator who is and they might be interested in reviving that effort. It would help us because a lot of the requirements of the statute were reporting and educating and trying to get people to understand what these great natural areas are all about. We have them here. They're the natural areas on our parks where we have a range of a hierarchy of levels of diversity of native species. We could ask if the legislature would look into this again and try to restore the act. The second, and I guess it hooks into our own climate efforts here. If we were to include work on biodiversity in the city of Ann Arbor, would hook into the conversations we were just having in terms of educating people about native species and all the life that depends upon native plants, particularly. What Senator Casperson did was just a shame. Heads rolled in the DNR, he made them roll. And I'm talking about the chiefs of divisions who were working on this. He forbid the DNR from using the word biodiversity in any document and for any purpose or doing anything with regard to it, as well as amending the law and essentially killing it. Sue Shink she and I had a conversation about it and she's interested, so might see what happens. The second suggestion I made, and this comes from so many folks that I know who are Latino and of various nationalities, and you all may or may not know that the state of Michigan prohibits non-citizens or non-visa holders from getting a driver license. That means a lot of people working in building and landscape and housekeeping and medical services, home medical services, are driving to work without a license. I can't imagine anything more ridiculous. And again, because our long-standing legislature has changed politically, perhaps we can fix this problem. One would require proof of residency in Michigan to get a driver's license, clearly. Our local police are very nice, as I understand it, to these folks when they're stopped for some reason. I don't think they are down south, but they shouldn't have to be out there driving in order to hold a job without a driver's license. Lastly, speaking of biodiversity, nothing could be more damaging to the existing biodiversity of the city of Ann Arbor than too many deer. We really need to get back to this. We really need to get back to this management of deer.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So these are all considerations for further discussion at a future meeting. So for solid waste, I think John Mursky proposed this amendment to prevent organic waste disposal in landfills. No?
It wasn't me, but I support it.
Oh, okay, John, okay, I think these all, John Calvert, I think these came from me. So I think it's important to encourage the state to restrict the sale of all packaging that includes intentionally added PFAS chemicals. Because these contaminations are alarming. They may soon prevent the recycling of plastics and toxic-free composts. For example, many states in New England now have stopped the land application of biosolids and composts that are contaminated with PFAS, which is an especially bad problem up there because of how many paper mills there are in northern New England. So the EPA has moved on drinking water regulations, stricter drinking water regulations this month. And so within the next year or two, we'll probably move on to wastewater and biosolids and composts. So I think it's important, and bills to do this have been passed in other states, and they have been drafted by Jeff Irwin is one of the sponsors of these bills that were submitted over the last 4 years in the state legislature, but they went nowhere. And this is another opportunity where now that we have a change in leadership, we may get at least a hearing. We might at least get a public hearing in a committee in the state legislature on these, and maybe move some legislation forward that might protect the city's budget and the public health. And it's the same consideration with amending Part 115, because organic waste disposal in landfills only creates methane. It's better disposed of as a compost within compost, because this is the point, is that if there is too much PFAS in biosolids and compost, they will end up in hazardous waste landfills, not even in regular landfills. So the cost of the city's budget could become quite high. So in terms of water quality, let's see, Sarah and I contributed something to this. So Sarah, do you want to go over the water quality issues?
Yeah. So I think reinstating Eagle's rulemaking authority to Part 4 of the water quality standards would be helpful to the city. So a lot of things have kind of been set in stone since the rulemaking authority was declined, no longer able to change. An update to use best available science in a lot of our water quality standard derivation. So like one example is for PFAS compounds, we have, single criteria for each PFAS, whereas, the state could look at viewing them as a class. So it would allow like more flexibility in how different regulations are applied, which could be useful to water treatment plants, things like that. So I think this is a really important thing for the city to get behind. And then the second one on here is to ban the use of perc in dry cleaning. So some of you might be familiar with the Arm & Cleaner site in downtown Ann Arbor. There was a perc release back in the 80s, and the company continued to use perc for many years. And it was unclear. We weren't able to determine whether the plumes were combined or not. So if there was still an ongoing release. So perc is very toxic. It causes indoor air vapor concerns to human health and long-term. It's a carcinogen. So getting this out of the dry cleaning business protects, the workers at the dry cleaning business, people who get their clothes dry cleaned don't have the chemical on their body. There's so many benefits to doing this. I think it would be silly for the city to not support. So those are my two. And if you guys have questions, let me know.
Yep. Thank you. Rita, or somebody from the pollinators group wants to talk about these. Any volunteers?
I'll try. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. But I welcome chiming in from any of the others, and I apologize for my loss of contact. So the pollinator group put these together to
talk about focusing on, at the state level, on mandating integrated pest management. The goal is to reduce use of pesticides overall. Second one, banning sale of seeds specifically treated with neonicotinoid pesticides. That's one of the reasons that farm fields are so toxic to pollinators. And to prioritize the use and maintenance of native plants. We set in highway rights of way that could be in many public spaces in particular, and encourage private use of native plants as well. So it's like reduce pesticides, improve habitat is the main goal of these. And I welcome comments from Bridget, Anya, Dharma. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, everybody. I think it would be useful if we could direct, because this document is for the city's hired lobbyists. So if we could direct these to specific bills, I think it would help facilitate their engagement. That's just a opinion of mine. And I have more information about PERC and many of these other things as well, if anybody's interested. So let's see. I'm thinking about how to proceed with this. I think, given the hour and everything, I think let's table this until the next meeting. So let's all think about it for a month or two, and then have some more specific proposals to submit, and prepare a resolution. Bridget.
I just have a quick question. Commissioner Collowart sent some really useful laws in other states that might pertain to some of these pollinator suggestions we had. Is that helpful to include that in something like this? Or are you saying Michigan when you say direct the lobbyists to?
I think, well, my understanding is that this document is really, the city hires lobbyists, both I assume at the federal and the state level. But most of the comments I've ever seen are directed to the state legislature.
Yeah, sorry, my question's confusing. I guess I mean direct the state legislature to examples of good policy in other states that would meet these suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll check back with the group, but I think we can add some more detail to make it more, to facilitate better.
Yeah, I think it would help just to make it a really specific ask. It's always good to have a more as specific an ask as you can have, and also, point to. I recommend people to look at. There's a website called Safer States, which tracks bills that are on different topics that are submitted in different state legislators on different topics. So like you want to go to that website and you can say, well, what laws on PFAS have been passed? And so they have a map, and then you can click on each state and see what they are. And so you can find plenty of model laws in other states for these issues. We're not exactly the leaders and the best in this category. So Chris, you have your hand up, and then Dharma.
Yeah, a couple of questions about the 2 solid waste items. I was under the impression for quite some time it's been not kosher to take wood and brush and landscape materials into the landfills. So what you're talking about here is food waste?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, I have to refine that myself. I'll work on that myself. That's one of the things I need to work on.
And then don't we want to go further than just packaging for PFAS chemicals? Don't we really want to get a whole lot more serious about not producing them and using them, period?
Well, yeah, the state of Maine has already done that as part of an extended producer responsibility law, an EPR law, and the state of Maine has done that. And that's something we should shoot for. But this is something that might be more possible. So you're right. I think it's probably better to be more ambitious and then reduce the scope of it later.
My thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Let's see, Dharma, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's preemptively taking it down so I didn't forget. I appreciate the suggestion for specificity because I think it is helpful. I mean, the thing I think to remember is that this is going to go to the policy committee that we have, and it will help them understand it better if we can connect it to things. And to that point, just a little Googling, you can often find things that speak to, like I just started looking at pollinators. You know, there are bills that get introduced all of the time that, didn't pass in some cycle, but they exist. And I've noticed that with examples of things that we have in our current adopted statewide policy plan, is that there have been things that have been introduced before that they would like to bring back to pass. So, for example, I just found the Michigan House Bill 4895 that specifically is about pesticides and pollinators. So I would just suggest, there probably is a single source for all of these House bills that have been introduced, but it might be worth pointing to one of those if it speaks to what's wanted.
And how much supportive information would the Council Policy Committee appreciate receiving?
That's a good question, but I would say at least like being able to reference a House bill. Like, for example, you have in water quality support HB 4083 to ban. That's what I mean. Kind of like what you were saying. I'm just saying that like in a lot of cases, there actually have been things that have been introduced. They just haven't been passed before. So
yeah, that makes it easy, I think, because what can happen is then you can see who was a co-sponsor of that bill, and then the city's lobbyists can go and talk to that person who had previously co-sponsored the bill or sponsored it. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's all keep that in mind and then refine these and then bring them and then have the working groups bring this to the next to the earliest future commission meeting where we can fit it in the schedule. Okay. Because Dharma, when would the policy committee is already finished what they're going to do for this year? Is that correct? Or
yeah, but it's coming up now because the cycle is not usually December and January. We did that because again, the change in the legislature, we revisited. So it's once a year normally. I think, Sean, we had talked about this before, what the cycle is of when we need to get it to them, but I don't remember what it was.
I believe it might have been March 31st.
Okay, so as soon as possible is what we should do.
Okay, well, all right. So we're running out of March. Okay. So why don't all the working group leaders try to get this spiffed up, and let's just send it to the Council Policy Committee as information. Yeah, not as a resolution, or because we'd have to actually pass a resolution to get council to consider it. And then council assigns it to the policy committee. So it can be a circuitous process.
I think actually what happens with these, and again, maybe Councilmember Dish or Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happens is that the committees vote on a set of policies to push forward. It gets included in the council packages when you do that. I don't think council really takes an action. It goes directly to this policy making committee. They kind of work and refine, and then they bring something back to council that's all of it.
Okay. Well, that's good news. That's good news. So let's all try to get the information to the Council Policy Committee through Dharma. Yeah. No.
I think we have to pass something. Is that right, Sean? We have to.
I believe that it gets attached as a memo to the meeting minutes from a meeting, which in this case would be this meeting.
So I think that requires a formal action of this body to do that.
Okay. Well, I don't feel like it's ready. So what should we do, y'all? Any suggestions?
Work on it some more, Steve.
Yeah, that's all we can do is work on it some more. And so, I mean, just as an aside here, I am working with a group that's working on the Polluter Accountability Act to try to get a Polluter Accountability Act. It used to be called Polluter Pays, but we've already decided to call it polluter accountability. And the fact is that the legislature does have a more friendly structure, leadership now, but the majority is very, very slim. So nothing's going to happen without bipartisan support. And so, and most of the activity the legislature is doing so far is not related to the environment. They're going to try to. I think we have time because I'm just saying that the legislature probably won't take up a lot of these things seriously until next year, until 2024. That's all. That's all I have to say on that. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is a good exercise, and let's keep at it. All right. So the next item on the agenda is reports from committees, other commissions, council, and chair. Do you have anything from solid waste?
Just a couple of quick updates. We've got a meeting of the larger zero waste group coming up later this week. And then next month, we've got the students from U of M will be presenting on April 13th as part of their class project. And then we're also working for them to present their work to city staff later in April to OSI and Public Works.
Great, John. Are you going to circulate that report? How would the commissioners be able to see that report?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. It'll be added to the U of M library collection, so it'll all be digital. So I can just share that link once it's ready.
Yeah, that'll be great. So then, is that it for solid waste?
Yes.
Okay. So then, water quality. I don't have anything to report right now. Pollinators. Nope.
I think you heard a big update from us that we've been working on. The pollinator resolution you saw tonight, and we will be continuing on our educational materials.
Okay, great. Now, natural features.
We asked up through the channels how the members of the Environmental Commission will participate in the master plan consolidation process with regard to natural features master plan. Haven't heard back yet. I assume will be included, and there'll be meetings and whatnot going on forward. And from that, we'll see what the Natural Features Committee does.
Okay. Have they selected?
Can I chime in quickly on that? The Natural Features Group has invested literally hundreds of hours in various draft ordinances, and I'd like to get clarity on where these are going. And it's awfully late tonight, but maybe we can set aside some time in our next meeting to really give clarity to the commission and to the Natural Features Working Group on are these going to be round filed or black hold, or are they going in somewhere, and how are they going to, what's the process going to be that these are somehow addressed? To me, it's not clear. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, no, thanks, John. Yeah, it's not clear. I mean, these have been worked on for years. I mean, there's been hundreds, maybe thousands of man hours, or working hours put in to these over the last 5 to 10 years. And so city staff, just to let everybody know, city staff decided that they weren't going to really look at those. They were just going to fold them into the comprehensive plan. So, but we have no idea how that's going to happen because as far as I know, they still haven't officially selected, a consultant to work on the comprehensive plan. Lisa?
They have selected a consultant.
Okay.
And as you know, there are rules set by the Michigan Planning
Enabling Act
Association planners or whatever it is. There are and there are rules about what sort of public engagement goes into a comprehensive, goes into revising an element of the comprehensive plan. So whatever the natural features group puts forward needs to go through that practice of public engagement. That's just kind of the way revising a comprehensive plan goes. So I'm sure that you'll hear from staff in terms of how you can be engaged in this process as well. And I'm sure that the work will be taken seriously, but a commission's work can't substitute for the work that needs to be done through the comprehensive planning process. So
okay,
it's a mix, right?
In my tulip. The request was to be at the table in the comprehensive planning process, not as a general public, but as environmental commissioners, one of whom was instrumental in writing the original natural features master plan 20 years ago. It's not in the wheelhouse of planners, and maybe not in the wheelhouse of the consultant they hire to know what to do about natural features. There are a lot of plans and consultants and things that happen in the city of Ann Arbor, frankly, that get done. Then they go to the public, and there's not much motion after things go to the public. As a longtime participant in this area, it really matters what happens to the natural features master plan, if it is to be, as you say, the guidepost for what we do about natural features going forward. We need to be at the table in the discussions of making that master plan, not fait accompli afterward.
And we are part of the city government system.
We are.
Though we don't have official responsibilities or any authority, but we are part of the city's government, and we also, our bylaws specify that we can hold public hearings on various topics outside of our regular meetings. So I just want to remind everybody of that fact. So it would be good to hear what's going on. I mean, so far, we've communicated with Mr. Mahoney our concerns, but we have not heard anything back yet. So I think it would be good to know when we might hear something back. I
don't feel comfortable pressing him right now. He's in the middle of a $750,000 brush cleanup effort.
Yeah.
Maybe on schedule. And we're entering into the budget, budget
I know.
negotiations.
Oh, I understand.
So,
I understand.
Yeah.
I think we all need to be patient, but
I know you've been really patient, and I know this is I understand the frustration, or perhaps I don't understand it because I can't possibly appreciate what it feels like to invest as much as you have. So, I mean, when next I meet with him, which I'm not sure when it's going to be because I can't make my regular meeting, I can ask him if he can share any thoughts, or if he were, who's going to respond to you all. Yeah,
just a little gentle reminder is all, and the thing is, see, that you have to understand that a lot of these feelings come from what happened with those Chapter 40 revisions that just disappeared into the legal department for a year. So we should get more turnaround time. We should be able to get a quicker turnaround time than that eventually. But okay, Lisa, I agree. That's good. That's a good.
I would guess the critical juncture comes when a consultant is in fact hired and then starts to work. And that would be the time to include us. And I think that's Mr. Leonard's decision, not Mr. Honey's.
Yeah, I have that same feeling. Any other comments on that issue? I mean, this speaks, of course, to other concerns that I hear, not just in this forum, but about transparency and key performance indicators and transparency and the way the city government is run. So I don't expect a conversation with this, but I'm just saying that it touches on that as well. So if are there any other comments on this? Okay, so let's see. Let's move on to other commissions. Let's see, energy. John, Energy Commission.
Yeah, sorry about that. We've been dealing in the Energy Commission with the same resolutions and topics that we've been discussing here, equitable engagement, the same resolutions. The only thing that we did that we haven't considered here was that we provided input on the council resolution to advance energy equity and resilience. And that's open for, I think, council to finalize and act on. Other than that, there's really nothing new. One thing, Steve, your comment just recently, both the Energy Commission as well as last year, the Environmental Commission passed resolution on performance transparency. And I don't know if either of the council member liaisons are willing and able at this point in time to comment on what's going to happen with those resolutions. If they can't do so tonight, it would be appreciated if they could do so at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So let's see. So let's do planning next.
We've only had one meeting since our last one. We had the same equitable engagement thing, and we passed several projects, none of which have like a lot of direct influence, but there's just one thing I would suggest, and that is that we pass the Ann Arbor Housing Commission's Catherine project near Carytown. And, since they have committed to doing, all electric building and things like that, there was a very candid conversation about what it's been like for them to be able to try to do geothermal and things like that. And John, I would suggest that you actually watch the last chunk of the meeting, which went very late, that we were up till probably 11:30 or something like that, because there's some really good just reality checks about kind of some of the challenges that they're having with how much geothermal they're needing, where they have the space to put it and not, and things like that, that I think would be important and interesting for Energy Commission folks to just, here's an example in our regulatory system with our staff review and all those kinds of things to see how that's actually panning out.
Oh, well, thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I would do that. What date was that meeting?
This was our last one on Tuesday, so it would have been the 21st.
Yeah, the 21st. Right. Okay.
Yeah, 21st.
Yep.
That's why district geothermal is so important, because if you do it parcel by parcel, it makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep. And it's much more cost effective. All right. So let's see. So Ann Marson is not here. So Parks Advisory will not have a report. How about transportation? Dharma.
Yeah, excited to let you know that we are adding shared e-bikes to our contract with Spin. So those should show up in the city soon. Spin has done a good job of basically kind of keeping their scooters from being nuisance objects. And so that's what's onto this move. We're going to try for 100. We used to have a bike sharing program, but it unfortunately didn't work very well and it went away. So we haven't had one since 2017. And I think the dockless nature of this, obviously there can be concerns about where people leave them, but assuming that it works as well as the scooters, it can also just up the convenience and accessibility. And there's a lot of equity things built into this new agreement, including, I think, half price rates for people below means, including people that live in housing projects, affordable housing projects, and people that don't have banks. They can get a special card so they don't have to use a smartphone. The other thing was that we sent a couple of letters for congressional funding requests, and one of that was for upgrading our crossings at crosswalks. to make things safer. And then another thing is to reinvestigate a new train station. So this is not reviving the old idea, but starting again. And this again is just asking our senators for federal dollars to do that. So that's my update.
Oh, I just had one question. Are they, has there been any talk of including cargo bikes?
I don't think so.
Shopping,
Haven't heard that yet. No, that would be cool.
When people are going shopping, they, because a lot of times that's what makes the choice between a car and a bike is,
yeah,
if
the
you're
ability to
hauling.
put stuff on it. And I don't know exactly the configuration of these, but they look pretty hefty. Maybe they have a basket on them. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just a thought. So how about, so let's move on to council. Any report from council? Lisa.
I mean, as you know, council discussed 415 West Washington on Monday night and it passed on first reading. There will be a second reading and a public hearing sometime in April. I don't know. I was actually just looking in my notes from let's see, no, that meeting was actually right. We just met. Environmental Commission just met. So I don't think that there was anything other than that. But Councilmember Ackman, if you have a better memory than me, please kick in.
I can't think of anything else now.
All right, thank you. So the chair has nothing more to say. So let's move on to the next item, which is a report from staff.
Steve.
Oh, yes.
I'm Councilmember Dish. The process for 415 West Washington is the council is passing a resolution that asks for a proposal. I can't find any drawings or anything on eTrackit to see how I.
Okay, yeah. So this process, like the process for the building that is going up on the former Y lot, this process has been to pre-entitle a site, and it comes to us not with a site plan, but with a concept plan. This kind of PUD could come either way, either with a site plan or with a concept plan. We don't want to have a site plan because that's extremely prescriptive. And what the idea is that the city is shopping out this concept plan, which has all the supplementary regulations of a PUD, all the things that we want in the building, shopping it out to developers to see who will step up and take on the project. Commissioner Gabrandel, do you have any corrections that you would like to make to what I just said? Okay.
No,
and as you know, if we do not pursue this course, which enables the cleanup to occur through a brownfield tax credit, if we do not pursue this course, then the city will have to bear the cost of demolishing the existing building, improving the stormwater, what shall we say? It would probably be detention and infiltration on that site, and doing the cleanup. And it is expected that this site can be cleaned up. There is not as much remaining material on it as there are on some other places. I think probably 721 may be a dirtier site. So it is expected to be able to be cleaned, but without the use of the brownfield TIF, which that money the city cannot access on its own behalf, the funding for this would have to come out of the general fund. And the only way for it to come out of the general fund is at the cost of other things that people want the city to take on or that the city is currently doing. So this is why the city is taking the approach of selling this site to a private developer and pursuing the cleanup in this way.
It's not necessarily affordable housing you're inviting.
We cannot put affordable housing on this site.
That's a misnomer.
No, I mean, well, it's next to a train track.
Yeah.
So,
There,
as part of the brownfield, it can 15% either on-site or payment in lieu can be done, but it can't be done with either federal funds or sustainability millage funds. So whatever affordable housing were to go there would have to be worked through the brownfield TIF requirements, because there's no other way to subsidize it. And I mean, in my ideal world, probably a payment in lieu would be better for this site. But I think some community members really felt that, I mean, it is a great, it's walkable, it's marvelous. I mean, fortunately, we have a lot of affordable housing going up in the downtown core. So I don't think it would be a terrible thing not to have it here. But again, it just, we have no way of subsidizing it through our own fund, through tax credits or even our own millage funds on this site.
my last question is, has anyone done a serious cost estimate for what the expense of the city would be for us to clear and clean that site?
Yes.
What is that amount? What is the number?
It is in the millions. The cleanup itself is not the biggest cost. The stormwater rectification and the dismantling of this building, which probably has asbestos in it.
Definitely has asbestos in it.
Definitely, thank you. Definitely has asbestos in it.
2 million or 10?
The report that I read said in the millions. So I don't think it means 10, but it doesn't really matter because the general fund does not have a surplus of any millions. And so this would have to be, we would have to say what we want to not do.
Well, we did get a $25 million gift from the federal government, didn't we, just recently?
Not to clean up this site. And, as far as I know, we've allocated all those monies in a lot of worthy ways. Many of them. Yeah, I know. I mean, so, I think there's yeah.
Thank you for it not being affordable housing. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Lisa. That was okay. So let's move on to report from staff.
Yes, thank you. As many of you likely noticed, we are doing things a little bit different. Starting this month, I have been working with staff to put together a written update. That will be what we do from here on out. So in the interest of time, I will say that the updates can be found in that written document, but I will very briefly go over the highlights. The free tree giveaway from OSI is planned for April 30th. We are also helping to organize the Ann Arbor Earth Day celebration, which is going to be held on Sunday, April 23rd. A20 Week is also coming up from June 4th to 10th, and we are looking for ideas for events for that. From the Public Works Department, their move-in, move-out drop-off event will be taking place at the end of April and in early May. The commercial solid waste franchise contract is going to City Council for approval. And public engagement meetings around the drop-off station design will be held on April 13th and April 19th. And finally, from systems planning, staff have started working on the source water protection plan project, which they anticipate to take around a year to a year and a half. And like I said, you can find more details on all of those updates in the written update document.
All right, thank you, Sean. Chris, you have your hand up. It's behind a tulip.
Sean, you can knock my hand out of the sky anytime you want to. Thank you.
Yeah, it's behind one of your tulips there. So, okay, so see, the next is items for next agenda. So I have the natural gas resolution and the let's see, and of course the solid waste activities update and discussion on the solid waste budget. This is when staff is going to explain their budget, their spending on various solid waste activities, and tell us a bit about their budget ask for the next budget cycle. That's going to be the major thing. So hopefully we can get through the natural gas resolution in an effective and expedited manner. And then in May, we have NAP in the Greenbelt, a review of NAP and Greenbelt activities and focusing mostly on invasive plants. So, and then meanwhile, we have the floodplain concerns continuing. So we'll try to fit that in somewhere soon, as soon as possible. Are there any other suggestions for Lisa?
Yeah, I don't know if we can add this to the solid waste evening, but as Sean just mentioned, City Council actually approved the commercial franchise, solid waste franchise. I think it would be interesting if they, even just spent 5 minutes and explained to us what that is, what the hopes are for that, how that's expected to change anything, if anything. I mean, the franchise was awarded to the company that's been providing the service already. So, but it is a restructuring, and I think not much is known about that, or not. I don't mean it in the sense of it's some big secret. I just think it's a shift, and it might be interesting to hear a little bit more about that. If no one else shares that, then I know I'll be talking to them anyway. But I thought you might be interested.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That the downtown alleys problem has been a big sore spot for many, many years. So it'd be good to have that should definitely be included, and that's part of the ask in this review. So it's going to be a full meeting. I was hoping the whole meeting would be dedicated to solid waste, but things are, time is catching up. So so I would encourage everybody to look at that, at what's publicly posted and on that topic before the next meeting. And we'll get information from city staff, provided before the next meeting. So let's see, any more comments about that? No. So the next scheduled meeting will be on April 27th, 2023 at 7 p.m. So the next item on the agenda is the second opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. So please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 922-9696-1644. And this information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate the desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments, and be patient. There's a delay of up to 30 seconds before a connection is established. So while we're waiting.
We do have a raised hand already, Steve.
Okay, well, let's put them on.
All right. Caller with number ending in 345. You should be allowed to speak now.
Hi, this is Kitty Kahn calling in again. I live at 515 Crow Street in the 5th Ward. I was originally going to just encourage you to please put forward a resolution about the floodplain. And, I've been getting a little frustrated listening, and I'm not really calling in to scold you because I understand there are a lot of things going on. I mean, I'm mind boggled by the lack of transparency and how the natural features thing got stuck in the attorney's. I mean, wow, I'm learning a lot now. But one thing I do know is that climate change is real. The planet is burning up. It's flooding. There's no time to waste here. You can't just put things off until next year. Please, how about a resolution regarding floodplains and no building on floodplains? I mean, really, think about it. You're the Environmental Commission. Okay. Then I also want to comment on 415 West Washington and what Councilmember Dish was saying, no, there definitely cannot be any affordable housing. It will be payment in lieu by a developer, because even Jennifer Hall, who is head of the affordable housing, said it can't be because it's on a floodplain. There are a lot of rules against this. Speaking of rules that I heard mentioned before, all these rules. Well, that's a rule. All right. And also, there is money to be had to clean up the toxins. We can't wait years until some developer decides they want that. There are lots of hoops to jump through for developers. We can't wait years. There are poisons in the ground now. They are spreading. The city is the responsible party. And the DDA has lots of money. They have millions. And I heard from my council representatives that the cost of the cleanup would be between 1 and 3 million. So it's not anywhere near 10. It's between 1 and 3. Why can't the DDA put in some money? And what about those ARPA funds? I think cleaning up toxins in our environment that is spreading is of utmost importance. I'm sorry I sound cranky, but I'm just mind boggled that everybody seems to think there's lots of time, no rush. This is imperative. It needs to be cleaned up now. It's important. You're the Environmental Commission. Please push for this to be cleaned up now. And for anybody that doesn't know what's happening on 415 West Washington, I encourage you to learn. There have been articles on MLive. Just go, it's been discussed in front of City Council for years. Educate yourselves, please. If you don't know what the city is planning to put on that flood fringe with all those toxins, please, please, please. And we can't wait for a developer to clean up this mess. It has to be cleaned up now. The DDA has money. There's ARPA funds. What could be more important than cleaning up toxins that are going to harm our residents? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for all you do. I just wish you could move a little more quickly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your input, Ms. Khan. So, anybody else, Sean?
Yes, we have a caller with a phone number ending in 012. Again, that's 012. You should now be able to speak.
Yes, hello. This is Muffy McKenzie calling again, and I too am calling just about the last comments that Councilman Dish just made about the cost. We've never had public factual numbers. We got the 1 to 3 million from our council person. And then to say that of the 25 million, it was spent on, I've forgotten the word that you used, important projects. I honestly believe that cleaning up toxins in a floodplain should be maybe top priority for our community. It was the city and the county who dumped those toxins. So it should be the city and the county's responsibility to clean them up and not to defer the responsibility to possible would-be, maybe not would-be developer. And I just would really plead for all of you to consider putting, a resolution to A, clean up the toxins, and B, not to build in the floodplain, as our brilliant city floodplain manager, I'm sorry, I don't know his title, but Jerry had very emphatically said not to build there. So I don't understand why nobody's listening to him. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that it's a very long meeting tonight, and I appreciate all your hard work and your diligence. Good evening.
Thank you for your input, Ms. McKenzie. Anybody else? Sean?
Yes, we have a caller with a number ending in 464. Again, that is caller ending in 464. You should be able to speak now.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This is Linda Brower again. Okay, this was a great meeting, long meeting. I want to encourage you next month, with no further delay, to pass some kind of resolution about gas hookups in new construction. I think it's really, we can't wait any longer. I hope you do that. I think in Energy Commission already did it, or they will. And I'm hoping with those two recommendations that somebody on council will bring those recommendations forward for debate at the council table. It's really important. You know why. People have spoken about why, so I won't go into that. I also want to urge you to develop a resolution following our floodplain manager's advice for no new construction in city-owned parcels in the floodplain for all the reasons that Jerry explained. And it may be too late for 415 West Washington, but there are other city-owned parcels in the floodplain like 721 North Main. And maybe it's not too late for 415 West Washington, because it will take a while before a developer is identified, if one is, because it's such a challenging property. We shouldn't be building on it. As environmental commissioners, I think I'm hoping that you will be open to the logic of why we shouldn't build on it. I think many people in city leadership have a hard time understanding why it's not advisable, but I'm hoping that if you can put forth a resolution that they will listen to you because you're environmental commissioners. But the last thing I want to say, I was very happy to hear the beginning, tentative beginning of a discussion about the problem that many times commissions are ignored. These are hardworking citizens. I've been on commissions. I know how hard you guys work. And often you're sidelined, just like what happened with the natural features thing. And I am worried it's going to happen with many things that you advise, and we need to look into that. And I'm hoping that council members will look into that and find a way to actually start listening more to commissions and heeding their advice, or at least discussing their advice. What happened about the natural features is really a shame. I know people have been working on it for 3 years, and it's too bad it took 3 years, but you're being sidelined, and I don't think that's right. There are things that are going forward despite the fact that our comprehensive plan hasn't been updated. TC1 zoning was developed and passed. They didn't have to wait till our comprehensive plan. Why should a natural features ordinance update have to wait till our comprehensive plan? There's a reason for that. And I hope that you will not take no for an answer. I hope that you will push more. And I appreciate people who talked about transparency tonight. There was, I think it was the Energy Commission that passed a transparency resolution about our A20 efforts, and it was passed unanimously. And I still cannot believe that the one council member on that body voted no. This is a problem. We need more transparency. We need council to pay more attention to the experts on the different commissions. And thank you for your work. And I just please hope that your voices are heard more. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for your comment, Ms. Brower. Anybody else on the line?
No one else currently has a hand raised.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, considering it's 10:14, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you,
And
everybody.
just say, let's think about building our agendas. We don't go an hour and 15 minutes over. I think we just had too much going on this agenda, and there were a lot of controversial topics. We didn't know how many people are going to call in. I get that. I also just, we crammed in too much. So
yeah,
I have to leave on a trip tomorrow. I'm screwed tonight. So I would really like to be able to just be more mindful about this for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'll try. All right, thank you, everybody. Well.